The rocket shuddered as if something enormous had taken it by the tail and given a warning shake. On the main monitor, the storm looked like spilled oil across starlight, an iridescent smear between Earth and the moon, curling in slow, impossible spirals. Reed Richards' fingers danced over the console, telemetry spiking. It's not just radiation, there's a harmonic pattern like a signature. I can turn us around, Ben Grimm said, knuckles white on the side rail, his pilot's instinct screaming. You tell me to stretch, I do it. Sue Storm leaned close to Reed, her voice steady on purpose. We came for data, not glory. If it's wrong, we leave. Guys, Johnny Storm called from the rear station, forcing cheer into the cramped cabin. If the ship melts, I'm voting we blame Ben. Ben shot him a look. Kid, if the ship melts, you're the one who'll be at home in it. On the ground, Victor Von Doom's voice came through the headset as clean as a knife. Richards, report. Reed pressed the comm, trying to keep his breath calm. Victor, the storm's wider than predicted. We're still outside the densest band. I want 2 more minutes. A pause. Doom never filled silence unless it served him. 2, Doom said at last. Not 3. And if your curiosity kills you, I will consider it a personal inconvenience. Dry, aristocratic amusement threaded the last word. Arthur Park's voice cut in behind Doom, thinner, anxious, full of numbers. Trajectory stable, but the field is tugging on you like a lens. Read if it refracts the drive plume. The ship lurched again. Warning lights strobed red. That lens just found us, Ben growled. Reed's eyes flicked across the readout so fast Sue could barely follow. The storm is pulling us in. Ben, full reverse. Johnny dumped the external collectors. Sue locked down the cabin seals. Sue's hands flew. The seals hissed shut, and for a second she imagined the thin metal skin between them and vacuum as a paper wall. Johnny's fingers slapped toggles. Collectors away, buy expensive toys. Ben pushed the thrusters. The ship answered with a groan, like it resented being asked to fight the universe. Then the storm touched them. Sound vanished. Every gauge spiked, fell, spiked again. Reed's stomach rose into his throat as if gravity had forgotten its job. Outside the window, colors folded over each other, violet turning into green, turning into a white so bright it felt hot. Sue gripped Reed's wrist. She could feel his pulse hammering, too fast for a man pretending to be calm. Reed. I know. He swallowed hard and spoke into the comm. Victor, we've been captured by a field. We're being. Static drowned him. Arthur shouted something, then the feed cut with a flat pop. Ben's voice came through clenched teeth. Controls are dead. Johnny laughed once, sharp with fear. So, we still blaming Ben. Sue closed her eyes. Everyone stay in your seats. Reed will find a way, he always does. Reed stared at the emergency panel. A thin plastic cover, a switch he'd hoped never to touch. We don't have enough consumables for days, he said, more to himself than anyone. If we're being carried, it could be weeks. Ben's breathing sounded loud in the small cabin. Then we make it weeks. Reed flipped the cover. The ship's experimental hibernation protocol, designed for injuries, not exile, lit up with a sickly blue. Sue's eyes opened. That's untested. So was the storm, Reed replied. His voice finally cracked. I'm sorry. Johnny tried for a grin. Hey, family field trip, right? Just longer. Ben reached over and clapped Reed's shoulder, heavy and warm. Do it. Reed initiated the sequence. Coolant flooded the chamber walls. Their breaths fogged. Sue threaded her fingers through Reed's, squeezing until the cold numbed both of them. I love you, she whispered. Reed turned his head as his eyelids grew thick. I know. Then softer, trust me. The last thing Johnny saw was Ben's face set in stubborn determination. And the last thing Ben heard was Sue's steady breathing, until even that faded into the long, lightless drift. 28 years later, alarms rang in a facility that hadn't heard human laughter in decades. Dust shook loose from rafters as the hangar doors groaned open. A battered spacecraft descended on jets that coughed like an old smoker, guided by Latverian beacon lights that had no right to still function. Victor Von Doom stood beneath the descending shadow, coat unmoving despite the turbulence, as if the air itself knew better than to touch him. His handsome features were calm, but his eyes tracked every scorch mark, every unfamiliar weld line, every faint shimmer clinging to the hull like frost made of stars. To his right, Arthur Parks watched with a hand pressed to his own throat. Under his collar, thin lines of light pulsed beneath his skin, contained barely. It's them, Arthur breathed. It's actually them. Of course it is, Doom said. The universe enjoys irony. Dr. Anya Varga approached, jaw tight. My team is ready. If the crew is alive, they'll be disoriented. Hypoxia, muscle atrophy, psychological trauma. You will keep them alive, Doom said, and it wasn't a request. Commander Ashak Kaur stepped into the hangar from a side door, flanked by two SWORD observers pretending not to stare. Ambassador Doom, this is now an international incident. Doom didn't look at her. Everything is international when someone wishes to take it from me. The ship touched down with a scream of metal. Steam poured off it in curtains. A hatch mechanism clicked, hesitated, then released with a reluctant sigh. Cold air spilled out, carrying the sterile smell of old systems, and something else, sharp as ozone. As medics rushed forward, Doom lifted a gloved hand, stopping them for a single heartbeat while his gaze fixed on the dark interior. Reed, he murmured, as if testing the name after all these years. Come home and tell me what you saw in my sky. Inside the craft, a faint movement answered. A slow, trembling inhale from someone who should have been dead. Arthur's lit veins brightened at the sound, and Doom noticed. Control yourself, Doom said quietly. Arthur nodded too fast. Yes, Victor. Doom smiled without warmth. The moment he'd been waiting for had arrived wrapped in ash and miracles were simply resources the unprepared failed to claim. Behind him, the hangar security cameras pivoted in perfect unison, lenses narrowing like hungry eyes. Doom kept his hand raised until the first medic's boot crossed the threshold. Then he lowered it. Proceed, he said, gently, they belong to the future now. And somewhere deep beneath the facility, in a chamber that hummed with stolen starlight, a crystal the size of a human heart answered with a single pulse of color. Reed's first breath tasted like cold metal and antiseptic. He tried to sit up and found a hand on his shoulder, firm, gloved, not unkind. Easy, a woman's voice said, clipped and practiced. You're awake. That's a victory. Don't waste it by tearing something. His eyes fought focus. Overhead lights swam. The ceiling wasn't the low, familiar curve of the ship's cabin. It was a hangar bay, ribbed steel, patched with newer welds over older scars. Beyond the medical lamps, shapes moved behind face shields. Sue was beside him, hair stuck to her forehead, one hand braced on the gurney rail as if she'd been holding the world steady. When she saw his eyes open, her expression fractured, relief first, then the immediate, stubborn demand to understand. Reed, she whispered. I'm here, he rasped, surprised by how small his voice sounded. How long? A laugh cut through the sterile hush. If you say 5 more minutes, I'm gonna scream, Johnny said from the next bed, voice hoarse but unmistakably his. He tried to lift 2 fingers in a lazy salute and grimaced like it cost him. Reed turned his head, searching for Ben. A low, rumbling inhale answered. Ben Grimm was upright on a reinforced cot that bowed under his weight, shoulders hunched as if he'd been caught doing something shameful. His skin was wrong, no longer skin at all. It looked like sandstone, layered and cracked, catching the light in dull facets. Ben stared at his hands, rotating them slowly, as though he might find a seam and peel this off. Reed, he said, voice thick, tell me I'm dreaming. Reed tried to swing his legs off the bed and nearly blacked out. The woman in pale green scrubs, braid tight, eyes sharp, pressed him back with a forearm. Dr. Anya Varga, she introduced herself without ceremony. Chief Medical Officer. You will not stand yet, Mr. Richards. Your muscles have been asleep for decades. Decades, Sue repeated, as if the word needed to be tested for poison. There's no gentle way to say it, Varga replied. Your vessel re-entered our airspace today. The facility you landed in was abandoned for a long time. We made it functional again. Barely. Reed's mind clutched at numbers like lifelines. It's what year? Varga hesitated, then answered, 2026. Sue's fingers tightened on the rail. Johnny's laugh died, leaving him staring at the ceiling as if it had betrayed him. Ben's mouth opened, closed. When he finally spoke, it came out as a prayer that didn't know who to aim for. 29 years. A shape stepped into the brighter circle of light, and Reed's chest tightened. Victor. He looked older in the way a statue looked older, more defined, not diminished. The suit was immaculate, the posture aristocratic, the face still handsome enough to feel like an insult. Doom's eyes, however, carried the weight of a world Reed hadn't seen. Richards, Doom said, Storm, Grimm, and the child who insisted he was indispensable. Johnny turned his head. Hey, I was indispensable, he swallowed, Victor, you look very expensive. Doom's mouth curved. Flattery from you is like a weather report from a drunk, amusing but unreliable. Sue's gaze hardened. Why are we here? Because you fell into Latveria, Doom answered, as if gravity had filed paperwork first. And because what returned with you is not ordinary radiation. At the word radiation, Reed's mind snapped to the storm, its harmonic pattern, its impossible lensing. He tried to remember the readings. They were there but blurred at the edges, like someone had thumbed the ink. I need my ship's logs, Reed said. Doom's eyes didn't blink. You will have access when you are stable. That's not an answer, Sue said. It is the only answer you get while you are in my care, Doom replied, voice smooth as poured steel. Reed forced himself to look past Doom. Cameras sat in the corners of the bay, modern, black-eyed, their housings too new for an abandoned facility. A drone hovered near the ceiling beams, nearly silent. When Reed's gaze found it, it drifted an inch, adjusting like it had been waiting. Varga noticed his focus and stepped between Reed and the camera line, not blocking it so much as challenging it. Medical area, she said to Doom, not a theater. Doom's attention slid to her. Doctor, I have allowed you resources. Do not confuse that with authority. And do not confuse your title with my oath, Varga shot back. These people are patients, not assets. A door on the far side of the bay opened, and Commander Ashakor walked in with the controlled pace of someone who expected traps. Her jacket still bore the ghost of a SWORD patch, half removed, as if she couldn't decide what she owed. She didn't look at Reed first. She looked at Doom. Ambassador, Kor said, SWORD requires observation rights, unknown energy signatures, unverified extraterrestrial exposure, post-crisis protocols. You know the language. Doom's gaze flicked, momentarily, to the two SWORD observers behind her, hands near holsters they hoped they wouldn't use. You arrived late, Doom said. We arrived as fast as we could, Kor replied. The world is missing half its military capacity. People are jumpy. A spacecraft that vanished in the 90s drops into a sovereign nation with cosmic residue, and you expect no scrutiny. Reed caught the phrase, missing half its military capacity, and filed it away like a splinter. Ben shifted on the cot, the steel complaining. Cosmic residue, he muttered, staring at his rocky forearms. Yeah, that's one way to put it. Johnny tried to sit up and immediately coughed, then coughed again, and this time a brief flicker of heat shimmered over his knuckles. His eyes widened. Sue. Sue's attention snapped to him, and Reed saw her inhale as if she was forcing fear down into something manageable. Family first, panic later. Arthur Park stood near the hangar edge, half in shadow, watching with an intensity that made Reed's skin prickle. Arthur's face was older, drawn tight with sleepless nights. When Reed met his eyes, Arthur looked away too quickly. A thin line of light pulsed beneath Arthur's collar. Reed opened his mouth, but a surge of dizziness cut him off. Varga took advantage of it. Everyone quiet, she ordered. You survived deep space stasis with unknown exposure. That does not mean you are ready for interrogation. She looked directly at Kor. Or politics. Kor's jaw tightened, but she nodded once. Observation only then. Doom's reply came after a beat long enough to make it feel like a decision, not a concession. Observation, he agreed. You will not touch the craft. You will not separate the crew. You will not remove samples without my approval and Dr. Varga's consent. Kor's eyes narrowed. That's not how. How it usually works, Doom finished for her. Commander, usual ended more than once in the last few years. People begged for strong hands and then complained about the grip. He stepped closer to Reed's bed, lowering his voice just enough that it felt private despite the cameras. You asked for the logs, Doom said. Ask yourself first what you will do when you read them, because the world you woke into is fragile, and it punishes the naive. Reed, still fighting the fog in his skull, managed. It punishes everyone. Doom's eyes glinted with something like approval. Good. You have learned at least that in your sleep. As Doom turned away, Reed watched a drone tilt, tracking Doom's movement with reverence. Not surveillance. Something closer to obedience. Sue leaned near Reed's ear. We stay together, she whispered, whatever year it is. Reed squeezed her hand, weak but certain. Across the room, Ben sat like a monument that hated itself, and Johnny stared at his own hands like they belonged to a stranger. Doom paused at the edge of the light and addressed the room without raising his voice. Recover, he said. Adapt. You will find this era has many rules. I suggest you learn which ones can be bent without breaking you. Commander Kor watched him go, then turned to the Fantastic Four with a look that held equal parts suspicion and reluctant awe. Welcome back, she said quietly. Try not to become another global incident. Reed's gaze drifted once more to the corner cameras. Somewhere beyond the hangar walls, something hummed, faint, resonant, like a crystal singing to itself. Survival, Reed realized, wasn't just breathing. It was learning who owned the air. The facility had been a shuttle hangar once. Now it was a triage ward wrapped in steel and cameras, with heat lamps that made Ben's rocky hide sweat in a way that shouldn't have been possible. Dr. Varga stood at Ben's bedside with a pen light and a jaw set like armor. You're retaining heat, she said, but your surface temperature is fluctuating in pulses. That's not normal physiology, even for whatever this is. Thanks, Doc, Ben rumbled. I was worried I looked too regular. Reed tried to make a joke and couldn't. The numbers on Varga's tablet were jagged, rising and dropping like an anxious heartbeat. Ben's shoulders were broader than they remembered, but his posture had shrunk, like he was trying to take up less space in the world. Across the ward, Sue hovered by Johnny's cot, watching him practice breathing like it was an exam. Every exhale steamed faintly. Johnny lifted his hands. Okay, so, I'm either running a fever or I'm becoming a human space heater. Asha Kaur, still in her half-stripped SWORD jacket, watched without pretending not to. That kind of anomaly gets containment orders. Sue's eyes flicked up. He's not a weapon. Neither were half the things that turned into weapons, Kaur said. The door at the far end of the bay opened with the soft precision of something expensive. Victor Von Doom entered as if the building had been designed around his silhouette. Beside him walked Arthur Parks, older, leaner, his gaze never still. And between them, carrying a tablet and a folder thick enough to break a nose, was a man Reed didn't recognize. David Lamb, Doom said, noticing Reed's look. My attaché to the United Nations. He collects facts the way misers collect coins. David nodded once. Mr. Richards, Mrs. Richards, Mr. Storm, Mr. Grimm. His accent was American, his tone bureaucratic, his eyes exhausted. Arthur's collar shifted as he swallowed. A pale line of light pulsed under his skin, bright as a wire heating. Reed sat up, ignoring Varga's glare. Arthur, what happened to you? Arthur's mouth tried to form an answer. It didn't quite make it. After you were gone, he said, voice thin, everything kept moving. Victor kept moving. I adapted. Doom's glance clipped over Arthur like an inspection. We did not come for sentiment. He turned to the ward at large. You will receive a briefing. You will not like it. That is not my concern. Varga stepped in front of him. My concern is that my patients can't walk unassisted yet. They can sit, Doom replied. And listening requires less muscle than breathing. Bring them. Kaur lifted her chin. SWORD will be present. Doom's smile was almost polite. SWORD is always present, like mold. They wheeled Ben on a reinforced platform, more construction dolly than medical device, into a smaller chamber that used to be a mission control office. The windows had been plated over. The only light came from a circular table and a wall of dormant screens. Doom tapped the table. Images snapped to life. A timeline that didn't feel like time so much as a series of impacts. A man in metal armor rocketed across the screen, fire roaring from his palms. Johnny leaned forward. Okay, that's not NASA. David spoke with the cadence of someone delivering a report to people who might faint. 1998 onward. Stark Industries shifts from weapons to advanced tech after a public incident. A billionaire named Tony Stark becomes Iron Man. Reed stared, mind snagging on the name. Stark, Howard's son. Correct, David said. He clicked. The Avengers follow, publicly assembled after an alien incursion in New York. Massive casualties. The world survived. Barely. The screen changed. A green giant tearing through a city. A man with a shield bleeding into rubble. Sue's hand found Reed's under the table and held tight. David kept going. Artificial intelligence event. Ultron, another near extinction. An AI tried to kill everybody, Johnny said, a laugh scraping out of him. That's comforting. A new image. 6 stones floating like captured stars. Reed's throat tightened. Those look like infinity stones, David said. Ancient objects of cosmic power. They were sought. They were used. The next clip was silent and worse for it. A purple giant, fingers snapping, people turning to ash. Ben's platform creaked as his hands clenched. A pebble-sized flake chipped from his knuckle and bounced across the floor. Sue inhaled sharply. That happened. It happened, Kor said, voice low. And then it unhappened, 5 years later. Reed's gaze went to Doom. You didn't mention any of this. I suspected you would prefer facts arranged in order, Doom replied. Not screamed at you while you were strapped to a cot. David clicked again. Footage shifted, people with strange abilities. Headlines about mutant registration, protests. A woman's face framed by the words reality event. Mutant expansion, David said. A surge in activated individuals. And an incident informally called House of M, reality altering. The aftershocks still shape policy. Reed watched the headlines flicker and felt the weight of a world trying to legislate miracles. David's next slide was a satellite view of Las Vegas, then the same view reduced to a cratered scar. Sue's fingers tightened until Reed's bones protested. Tremors, David said, a mutant seismic event. Las Vegas was functionally decimated. The federal response was slow, international aid stalled, and then the screen filled with a shape-shifting figure, green blood on concrete. Kree-Skrull conflict spillover, David continued. A Skrull infiltration confirmed, secret invasion, trust in institutions fractured, military capacity worldwide reduced, alliances strained, borders hardened. Silence settled heavy. Reed felt it in his ribs, not just shock but a predator's awareness. A wounded world. A world that would reach for control the way a drowning man reached for a throat. Ben spoke first, voice smaller than his size. So people disappeared, came back. Mutants popped like popcorn. Vegas got turned into a sinkhole. And you're telling me the solution is more uniforms. Doom's eyes fixed on him. The solution is that someone stops waiting for heroes to arrive. Sue leaned forward. Victor, we're here now. Are you? Doom asked, and there was no cruelty in it, only impatience. You can barely stand. One of you is turning into a furnace. One of you is stone. Richards, you are brilliant, yes, but brilliance does not stop an armada. Reed held Doom's gaze. Neither does surveillance. Kor's posture sharpened at that, like a dog hearing its name. Doom tapped the table again. The images vanished, replaced by a rotating crystal schematic, a prismatic core with containment rings. Project Spectrum, Doom said. Arthur's throat worked. The light under his skin brightened, then dimmed, as if responding to the schematic on instinct. Reed leaned in despite himself. What is it? A single, stable spectrum crystal, Doom said, capable of holding reconstituted cosmic energies, defensive application, planetary shielding, an answer to the next Thanos. Reed's eyes narrowed. You're harvesting infinity stone residue. Doom's smile thinned. You catch on quickly for a man who slept through the apocalypse. Arthur shifted uneasy. It's not residue, he said. It's echoes, harmonics, same kind of pattern your storm had. Reed's spine went cold. You've been working off our storm. We have been preparing for the future, Doom corrected. And your return is not a coincidence. Your exposure is a key. You will help me tune Spectrum. Sue's voice stayed calm, but Reed heard the warning in it. Help him how? By sharing knowledge, Doom said. By being useful. And if we do, Johnny asked, trying for casual and landing on brittle. Doom looked at him as if considering whether to answer a child. Then you will remain guests of Latveria until the world decides what to call you. Citizens, assets, or threats. Varga's chair scraped back. They are not prisoners. They are survivors, Doom said. Survivors learn the difference between freedom and permission. Arthur's breathing quickened. The light beneath his skin surged, crawling up his neck like sunrise forced through veins. Kor took a step back. Parks. Arthur's eyes flashed white. The air around him shimmered. For a heartbeat, he was a man made of edges. Then the room exploded into color. A beam of hard light lanced from Arthur's palm, slicing across the ceiling. Sparks rained. A security drone fell in two clean halves, its severed halves clattering like dropped cookware. Arthur staggered, horrified, clutching his hand as if it belonged to someone else. I didn't, Victor, I didn't. Doom moved fast, too fast. A circle of green glyphs snapped into existence around Arthur's wrist, tightening like a cuff. The light dimmed, trapped. Reed stared. Sorcery, he breathed. Doom's gaze didn't leave Arthur. Among other disciplines. Ben groaned, a sound like rock under pressure. A fresh crack split along his forearm. He grit his teeth hard enough Reed thought they might shatter. Reed, I'm getting worse. Sue rose, stepping between Reed and Doom as if her body could negotiate. Victor, please, we can talk. We can figure out Ben's condition. We can figure out what happened to Arthur, but not like this. Doom finally looked at Reed again. His voice softened just enough to be dangerous. This world punishes hesitation. Help me build something that holds, or watch it fall apart and pretend you were above the mess. Reed felt Sue's hand on his arm, anchoring him, felt Ben's pain like a moral debt, felt Johnny's fear behind the jokes. Across the table, Arthur's contained light pulsed, frantic as a trapped heartbeat. Reed spoke carefully. Show me the ship logs, all of them, and if Spectrum is defense, you'll let Dr. Varga and Commander Core audit your containment. Core's eyes snapped to Doom, surprised at being included. Doom's mouth curved in dry amusement. Richards, even after 28 years you negotiate as if truth is a shared religion. He leaned in. Very well, partial access, a demonstration, and you will consult. Sue's whisper brushed Reed's ear. We stay together. Reed nodded once, but his eyes never left Doom. Survival, he realized, wasn't only learning who owned the air. It was deciding what you trade to breathe it. The hangar smelled like old fuel and new bleach, an uneasy compromise between what the facility had been and what Doom insisted it was now. A strip of sun came through a high window that hadn't been plated over, falling in a clean bar across the floor like someone had measured it. Ben stood in that light, legs planted wide, fists flexing as if he could squeeze sensation back into stone. Varga watched him from behind a rolling cart of monitors, her braid tight, her eyes tighter. Slow, she warned. Your joints aren't joints, there. Rocks, Ben finished, voice gravel. Doc, I got it. Johnny bounced on the balls of his feet, trying to look fearless and succeeding only in looking young. Okay, so this is the part where we find out what powers we got, right? Please tell me I can fly. Please. Sue's gaze swept the hangar, taking inventory of exits, cameras, and the polite distance of Latverian security. We're not doing this for entertainment. Reed stood beside her, shoulders still thin from stasis, but his eyes sharp. The last few days had been pain, rehab, and briefings that left him staring at ceilings long after the lights dimmed. The world had moved on without asking permission. Now it demanded forms. Commander Core leaned against a support pillar, arms crossed over the half-removed SWORD patch. You're doing it because your cosmic exposure is registering as a potential threat. Control demonstrates intent. Control demonstrates compliance, Sue corrected. The hangar door opened with a hush. Doom entered flanked by two silent guards and Arthur Parks. Arthur looked like he hadn't slept. Light threaded faintly beneath his skin, concentrated along his forearms like veins filled with dawn. His eyes avoided Reed's. Doom's gaze took the room in a single sweep, as if the air itself were his property. Dr. Varga, Commander Core, Richards. He nodded once to Sue, to Ben, to Johnny, as if acknowledging pieces on a board. You are standing. Good. The world prefers its miracles upright. Reed didn't move. You said a demonstration. And a calibration, Doom replied without apology. He gestured. Technicians wheeled out a semicircle of black pylons topped with prismatic lenses. The lenses angled toward the fore with insect precision. Core pushed off the pillar. Those aren't medical instruments. They read energy gradients, Doom said, which is, at the moment, their medical reality. Varga stepped closer, jaw set. No invasive collection, no induced distress. Doom's dry smile flickered. You confuse me with someone who wastes useful subjects. Ben snorted, gee, thanks. Reed's stomach tightened at the word subjects, but he forced his voice even. What exactly are you measuring? Arthur spoke before Doom could. Harmonics, he said quietly, then swallowed. Your storm wasn't random, it sang. These pylons listen. Reed's mind snagged on that. Sang, like the hum he'd heard in the walls since waking. Doom clapped once and the sound snapped through the hangar. Mr. Storm, if you insist on flight, begin with heat. Johnny rolled his shoulders. Okay, how? Imagine the switch, Sue said, softer. Her hand touched his elbow, grounding him. Johnny inhaled, then exhaled with intent. Flame licked across his skin, not consuming but coating, turning him into a bright, wavering silhouette. The heat slapped outward. A technician stumbled back. The pylon's lenses dilated, drinking it in. Johnny's grin flashed through the fire. Oh, that's... His excitement spiked, and the flame surged. Sue moved without thinking. A translucent wall snapped into existence between Johnny and the technicians, catching the blast like a pane of glass catching a thrown stone. Heat rippled across it and died. Johnny's eyes widened. "Sue, you did that." Sue stared at her own hands as if they belonged to someone else. I felt it coming." The wall shimmered, then vanished. Core's expression shifted, suspicion edged with reluctant awe. A force construct. Doom's head tilted, pleased in the way a mathematician was pleased by a proof. "Again, smaller, hold it." Sue swallowed and raised her palms. The invisible barrier formed, thinner this time but steadier. Her breathing slowed as she learned the shape of it. Reed watched, heart thudding, not from fear of her power but from fear of the world's reaction to it. "Mr. Grimm," Doom said. Ben looked at Reed once, a question with no words. Reed answered by standing a little closer. Ben stepped to a reinforced block near the center of the hangar, something that looked like it belonged in a demolition test, not a clinic. He wrapped his fingers around the steel edge. The block groaned, then it bent. Ben's face tightened, not from effort but from emotion he didn't want anyone to see. He set the block down gently, as if he were afraid of breaking it further. Varga's eyes softened for a fraction. "Pain." "Always," Ben admitted, "but I can stand." Reed felt a fierce, ugly gratitude at that simple sentence. Doom's gaze slid to Reed as if saving the most interesting variable for last. "And you, Richards, the leader, what did the storm make of you?" Reed hesitated. In the last day he'd noticed it in small ways, a reach that seemed too long, a joint that didn't complain when it should. He dismissed it as weakness, as lingering stasis. Now, under a dozen lenses, he lifted his hand toward a metal ring set on the floor 10 feet away. His fingers extended. Not metaphorically, physically. His knuckles slid forward as though his bones had decided to negotiate new terms. His arm lengthened, skin stretching without tearing, muscle thinning and holding. Sue sucked in a breath. "Reed." Reed's fingertips touched the ring. The pylons chimed, a soft, crystalline sound that made Arthur flinch. Reed pulled his arm back. It recoiled smoothly, as if it had always been possible. Core's voice was low. "That's not human biology." "No," Reed said, staring at his own hand. "But it's mine." Doom watched the sensors, not the man. On a nearby screen, Reed's stretch registered as a cascade of spectral peaks, colors that weren't quite colors, spiking in patterns that matched the hum Reed had heard in the walls. Arthur's light brightened in response, like an instrument resonating with a tuning fork. Varga noticed. "Parks, sit down." "I'm fine," Arthur lied, voice thin. Doom lifted a hand, and a faint green sigil flashed at Arthur's wrist, gentle as a warning. The glow under Arthur's skin steadied. Doom turned toward the cameras that had been quietly activated along the hangar rafters. "Today," he said, voice pitched for an audience beyond the room, "Latveria fulfills a duty the world forgot. We recover the lost, we heal the broken, and we do it without chaos." Core's eyes narrowed at the word chaos. She looked up at the cameras, then back to Doom. "You're broadcasting." "Controlled transparency," Doom said. "A concept you should appreciate." Johnny's flame sputtered down, leaving him flushed. "So we're a press release." "Survivors," Sue corrected, stepping closer to Reed. "We decide what we are." Reed kept his voice calm, though his pulse was loud in his ears. "Victor, you want data, fine, but you give me access to the logs you've withheld. And your Spectrum project, whatever you call it, you let Varga and Core see containment protocols. Otherwise, no more demonstrations." For a moment, the hangar held its breath. Doom's eyes fixed on Reed. The old rivalry was there, sharpened by 28 years of a world that had nearly ended. Then Doom inclined his head. "You accept the danger of your own nature. Good. It means you are not useless." Reed didn't like the wording, but he nodded once. "I accept the danger. I won't pretend it isn't there." Doom made a small motion to David Lamb, who produced a slim tablet. Documents flickered on screen. Permissions, limitations, definitions that could turn a person into a category. Sue's hand found Reed's wrist, not stopping him, reminding him he wasn't alone. Reed signed. Days blurred into a regimen. Monitored walks down long corridors. Strength exercises that left Ben shaking but upright. Breath control for Johnny that taught him not to panic when heat rose. And quiet concentration for Sue, who learned her invisible walls could be curved, could be cradles as well as shields. On the 6th day, Reed walked without help for the first time, his gait stiff but steady. Ben lumbered beside him, each step a negotiation with gravity. Sue matched their pace. Johnny trailed, pretending not to watch the cameras. That night beneath the facility where the hum was strongest, Doom stood before a prismatic containment chamber. Within it, a crystal the size of a human heart pulsed faintly, hungry. Arthur waited at his side, hands clenched, eyes fever bright. "You were sloppy in the briefing room," Doom said. Arthur's shoulders sank. "I didn't mean to." "You were effective," Doom corrected, and Arthur froze. Doom's voice lowered to something almost intimate. The beam was precise. The fear it produced was instructive. They will remember that their freedom is fragile. Arthur swallowed, relief and need twisting together. "I'm loyal, Victor, I'm trying." "I know," Doom said. His gaze moved from Arthur to the crystal. "And loyalty should be rewarded." He tapped a control rune. A hairline thread of spectrum energy arced toward Arthur's wrist. Arthur shuddered as the light under his skin brightened, steadied, becoming less pain and more power. Above them, in the hangar, the Fantastic Four slept in a world of cameras. Below, Doom listened to the crystal sing back in new, familiar harmonics, tuned now by four survivors who thought they were learning to live again. Doom smiled just slightly, and the smile did not reach his eyes. Reed's borrowed badge opened doors that didn't want to be opened. Past midnight, the facility's lower levels stopped pretending they were medical. The air cooled, drier, threaded with a faint metallic sweetness that reminded him of solder and lightning. Cables ran in disciplined bundles along the ceiling, vanishing into walls that hummed like a throat holding a note. Arthur Parks met him at the security gate, posture rigid, eyes too bright for the hour. Light pulsed under his skin in slow, hungry beats, as if his veins were trying to remember the shape of a sunrise. "You're not cleared for this," Arthur said. Reed held up the tablet Doom's attaché had issued. "You signed off on a joint audit, Varga and Core. You were in the room." Arthur's mouth twitched. "I wasn't the one who signed. I'm the one who cleans up when something goes wrong." The gate slid aside anyway. Inside, Project Spectrum wasn't a name. It was a cathedral of instruments built around a single fact: energy wanted somewhere to go. A crystal sat in a prismatic containment frame, the size of a human heart, turning minutely as magnetic fields adjusted. It wasn't clear. It wasn't colored. It looked like light had congealed into decision. Reed's stomach tightened. "That's the prototype." Arthur's gaze flicked to it with a kind of longing that made Reed think of thirst. "It's stable when it's fed. That's the problem." Reed stepped to the main console. Rows of spectral readouts climbed and fell in familiar peaks, signatures that matched the strange harmonics his body had begun to carry. Doom had built a machine that listened for them. He scrolled until he found the equation Doom had left half-finished in the open, as if daring Reed to solve it. Reed recognized the handwriting in the variable labels, Victor's old habit of turning even mathematics into rhetoric. The core issue was brutal in its simplicity. You could compress the energy into a portable prism, yes. You could also let it tear itself apart the moment a human hand tried to hold it. Arthur leaned over his shoulder. "He wants it handheld, field deployable. You know what that means." "It means he wants people to carry it," Reed said. "Or he wants one person too." A tremor ran through the floor, light, quick, rattling a tray of tools. Somewhere above, an alarm chirped and then silenced itself. Latveria had been shivering like that more often, the world's new habit of reminding everyone it could still break. Reed forced his focus back to the numbers. Compression created heat. Heat created drift. Drift created runaway resonance. The storm had taught him something while he slept. The universe didn't explode when it was forced into a shape. It sang a counternote. He began rewriting Victor's approach, not by fighting resonance but by binding it. A lockhand key made of phase cancellation. A feedback loop that wasn't electronic but harmonic, using the same spectral voice that had changed him. Arthur's breath hitched when Reed plotted the final curve. That flattens the spikes." "It doesn't flatten them," Reed corrected, tapping the screen. "It braids them. If you want it in a human hand, you need it to behave like a living system, self-correcting." Arthur stared at Reed's equations as if they were a confession. "He'll love this." Reed saved the work under a neutral file name, then slid a copy to an encrypted partition he discovered only because the terminal hesitated before denying him access. The hesitation was the clue, a back door. Someone had built one with confidence. Reed followed it. A map bloomed across the screen. Satellites, defense relays, civilian broadcast nodes. Not Latverian, global. A web with Latveria at the center. He clicked a node, labeled with an acronym he hadn't heard in the 90s. EDITH. It's dark. A list of permissions scrolled by, repurposed, redirected, rewritten. Beneath that, a UN order draft populated itself. Detainment warrants, for accountability, aimed at names Reed recognized from Doom's briefings. Arthur's voice came small. Don't do that. Reed didn't look away. How long has he been inside their systems? Arthur's light flickered, pain and shame mixing. Since he realized waiting for permission was a luxury. Reed, you were gone. Everything happened. He thinks he's preventing the next. The next catastrophe, Reed finished, by becoming one. He copied the satellite map to his hidden partition, then closed the windows until the screen showed only harmless sensor graphs. Above them, footsteps approached with the measured cadence of guards, who knew exactly how many beats it took to reach the door. Doom entered without hurry. He looked at Reed's work, and something like satisfaction touched the corner of his mouth. You solved it. Reed kept his voice neutral. It will stabilize the prism, but it's not a toy, Victor. Doom's gaze moved to Arthur, then back. Everything is a toy to someone. You simply need to decide who is allowed to play. Arthur's fingers curled, and a thin filament of light slipped between them before he clenched it away. Doom's tone softened, almost cordial. Come, the world is waiting to meet its ghosts. The press staging area had been assembled in the hangar with surgical efficiency. Latverian flags, UN banners, a wall of cameras, and drones hovering like polite insects. SWORD personnel lined one side, Commander Corps among them, jaw tight as if she were biting down on every objection. Dr. Varga stood near the medical exit, arms folded, her eyes tracking Ben like a monitor. Ben Grimm's rocky shoulders rose and fell with effort. Hairline cracks traced his forearms, glowing faintly at the edges as if heat lived under the stone. Sue stayed close enough to steady him without touching. Johnny paced like a caged matchstick, trying to pretend he wasn't watching the cameras. Doom stepped to the podium. 29 years ago, he said, voice carrying without amplification, 4 explorers vanished. Today, Latveria returns them to you. A murmur rolled through the crowd. The drones zoomed, hungry. Doom gestured, and the hangar doors behind him opened to the gray daylight. Reed Richards, Susan Storm Richards, Jonathan Storm, Benjamin Grimm. He paused, letting the names settle, then added, You called them lost. You may call them the Fantastic Four. Johnny let out a breath that was half laugh, half panic. He really did it. Sue's smile didn't reach her eyes. It's a leash, made of applause. Another tremor shivered through the hangar. Microphones squealed and recovered. Doom didn't flinch. He simply spread his hands as if the earth itself were offering punctuation. When the flashbulbs peaked, Doom leaned slightly toward the nearest camera. They will be safeguarded. Latveria will ensure their recovery. The world has suffered enough chaos. Commander Corps' eyes narrowed at the word safeguarded. Ben shifted, grimacing, and Varga moved instinctively, ready. Reed watched Doom watch Ben. After the cameras were fed and the questions deflected, Doom led Reed into a side corridor where sound died against thick walls. 2 guards stayed at a respectful distance, respectful enough to hear everything. Reed didn't wait. I saw the network, Stark's satellites, UN warrants, a back door into SWORD. You're not building a defense system. You're building a cage. Doom's face remained composed, but the warmth from the podium was gone. A cage keeps predators out. It also keeps everyone in. Doom stepped closer, voice low, intimate in the way a blade could be intimate. You of all people should understand triage, Richards. The world has bled out twice in a decade. I will not allow a third. And you'll decide what freedoms to amputate. Reed's hands curled. You always needed to be the one holding the scalpel. Doom's eyes flicked toward the hangar door, toward Ben's labored silhouette. Your friend is failing. Reed felt the words like a hook. He's stable enough. He is not, Doom cut in, then lowered his voice again. I can stabilize him. Spectrum can. The same braided resonance you wrote, applied properly, it can stitch his molecular drift. I can give him a body that does not crack apart when the world shakes. Reed's throat tightened, and the price. Doom's dry wit returned, colder now. Cooperation, full access, no secrets. You will help me perfect the handheld prism. Reed saw it in an instant. Ben as leverage, the equation as a key, the 4 as proof to the world that Doom was salvation. Sue appeared at the corridor's mouth, Having followed the shift in Reed's posture the way she'd begun to sense oncoming heat, her eyes moved between them. What did you offer? Doom didn't look away from Reed. A cure, or as close as science and sorcery allow. Ben's gravelly voice carried from behind Sue. Reed. One word, heavy with warning and hope. Reed swallowed. Knowledge could save. It could also enslave. He met Doom's gaze. You don't get to buy my family. For the first time, Doom's composure showed a hairline fracture. Not anger, but disappointment, as if Reed had failed a simple test. Family, Doom said softly. Yes, that is what you call it when you are afraid to admit you would sacrifice the world for one man. Sue's hands lifted. The air between Doom and Reed thickened, an invisible plane forming with a low shimmer that made the corridor lights bend. Step back, Sue said, calm and fierce. Now. Doom regarded the barrier, then Sue, as if appreciating craftsmanship. You learn quickly. He turned to leave, his cloak brushing the floor without sound. Consider my offer while Mr. Grimm's body negotiates its next collapse. Survival is an excellent teacher. As he walked away, Arthur stood at the far end of the corridor, pale light pulsing beneath his skin. He looked at Reed as if he wanted to speak and couldn't afford to. Reed watched Doom go, feeling the clean severing of something that had once been friendship. Behind him, Ben exhaled a rough, steadying breath. Johnny muttered, "We're not staying here," but his voice lacked conviction. Sue's barrier dissolved, and she slipped her hand into Reed's. Trust me, she said. Reed held on, because it was the only thing in the corridor Doom hadn't engineered. Far below, the crystal in its frame pulsed in time with Arthur's heartbeat, and Doom's footsteps did not echo at all. The siren started as a test tone. A single, careful note pushed through the facility's speakers and then stopped, as if someone had touched a piano key and decided the sound was too honest. Commander Ashak Kaur felt the silence that followed more than the noise. She stood in the corridor outside the hangar ward, watching Latverian guards roll a steel shutter down across the main exit. The sound was mechanical, unarguable. What is this? She asked the nearest officer. He didn't meet her eyes. Temporary containment, by order of Ambassador von Doom. Containment for what? A tremor answered first, soft but deep, making the overhead lights sway on their mounts. Somewhere in the building, a glass instrument clinked against another piece of glass. Dr. Anya Varga came striding from the medical bay, braid tight, face set in that steady anger she reserved for panic disguised as policy. Not for patients, she said, to no one and everyone. He promised medical priority. This is a hospital, not a vault. Kaur's hand went to the half-removed SWORD patch on her jacket like it was a remembered oath. Her comm unit blinked red. Uplink refused. They've cut my satellite relay, she murmured. Varga's gaze flicked to the small camera in the ceiling corner. Of course they have. The camera rotated slow, polite, watching, reporting. Far below, Victor Von Doom listened to 3 streams of data at once. Seismic sensors, defense network pings, and the shallow, irregular rhythm of Benjamin Grimm's vitals. In the operations suite, Arthur Park stood beside the main console with his hands folded behind his back, as if the pose could keep him from shaking. The light beneath his skin was brighter today, a pale band at his throat and branching threads along his wrists. He looked like a man trying not to become a sunrise. Doom did not look at him when he spoke. Seal the borders, Doom said, voice calm enough to be mistaken for kindness. Arthur's swallow bobbed in his throat. Kaur will escalate. SWORD will file for immediate custody. They can file whatever they like, Doom replied. Their military is limping, their credibility is in ruins, and their leaders are afraid of the next headline. Fear makes paperwork slow. A feed opened on the central screen. A low-orbit satellite cluster responding to a hidden command pathway, rerouting its authorization keys as easily as a conductor shifting an orchestra. Arthur's eyes tracked the code. EDITH is still accepting your handshake. Stark built a marvelous system, Doom said. It only required a will strong enough to use it without apology. Another tremor rippled through the floor. This one had teeth. A ceiling panel clicked loose and then settled again. Arthur flinched. The light in his veins surged, a reflex hungry for somewhere to go. Doom finally turned. Control yourself. Arthur's jaw tightened. I am controlling myself. Then you are doing it poorly. Doom's dry aristocratic wit landed like a ruler snapped across knuckles. He lifted one gloved hand and traced a small, precise gesture in the air. Green sigils sketched themselves into existence, tightening around Arthur's forearms like bracelets made of geometry. Arthur hissed, not in pain exactly, more in frustrated relief. You don't have to. I do, Doom said, because you are useful and because you are failing. The sigils dimmed, leaving Arthur steadier, his glow reduced to a simmer. On another screen, Reed Richards' profile flashed beside a hospital room feed. Reed sat on the edge of a cot, posture too still, eyes moving as if he could map the building by sound alone. Sue stood near him, hand hovering in that new way she had, like she could feel pressure changes in the air. Johnny paced. Ben lay down, shoulders rigid, the cracks in his rock hide faintly luminous. Doom watched Ben's vitals spike and drop. A clock could do that. A man could not. Prepare the chamber, Doom said. Arthur's breath hitched. You're doing it now. Yes. Doom's gaze stayed on the medical feed. Mr. Grimm's deterioration is no longer a future problem. It is a present inconvenience. Arthur's voice went low. You need Reed's braided resonance equation. I am aware. And he won't give it. Doom's mouth curved. Then he will. They moved through corridors that were too clean for their history, light striping Doom's armor and cloak in alternating bands. Latverian guards opened doors without being asked. Machines hummed as they rerouted power, subterranean conduits feeding something that drank electricity like wine. The treatment chamber had once been an engine testing bay. Now it held a containment dais ringed with prismatic pylons, and in its center, a cradle shaped for a body built of stone and regret. Ben Grimm was brought in on a reinforced gurney, Varga at his side, hands gloved and steady. This is experimental, Varga snapped at Doom the moment he entered. You are not his physician. Doom regarded her as one might regard a brave candle in a storm. No, I am his option. Core pushed in behind, blocked briefly by guards until Doom lifted a finger. Her eyes took in the pylons, the subtle shimmer of fields, the dark conduits leading downward. You're weaponizing their exposure, she said. I am preventing extinction, Doom replied. You mistake decisiveness for cruelty because you have the luxury of committees. Reed stepped into the room with Sue and Johnny close, moving as one unit, family by necessity now. Reed's voice was measured, careful not to shake the air. Victor, don't do this as leverage. Doom's gaze went to Ben. Mr. Grimm is not leverage, he is dying. Ben managed a rough chuckle that ended as a grunt when another crack split across his shoulder. I hate Bane, right, he rasped. Sue's eyes flashed. We can find another way. Doom turned, cloak swaying. You have had days to find another way. The earth itself is reminding you what days are worth. As if on cue, a tremor rolled through the facility. The prismatic pylons rang softly, like tuned glass. Arthur entered last. The room changed when he did, light gathering around him as if it recognized its own. Johnny stiffened, flame threatening. Easy, Sue said, and a faint distortion rose between Johnny and Arthur, an invisible barrier forming on instinct. Arthur's eyes stayed on the crystal conduit embedded in the chamber wall, the one feeding thin threads of spectrum energy into the pylons. His lips parted. Just a little, he whispered to nobody. Doom stepped in front of him without touching him. Not now. You will be a channel, not a glutton. Arthur's hands flexed, light licked between his fingers. Doom addressed Reed at last. Your equation. Reed's chin lifted. You already saw enough to build this. Enough to begin, Doom corrected. Not enough to finish without burning him from the inside. He nodded toward Ben. You braided the resonance. You know how to stop the spikes. Varga looked between them, disgust sharpening her voice. You're bargaining over a patient. I am offering a cure, Doom said. Bargaining is what the world does when it pretends its hands are clean. Reed's eyes darted to Ben. Ben's breathing had become shallow. Each inhale a choice. Reed, Ben said quieter now. Don't. Doom lifted a hand and the pylons flared, casting prismatic lines across the chamber walls. The air thickened, alive with a high insectal hum. Place him, Doom ordered. The gurney locked into the cradle with a heavy click. Ben's rocky body settled, cracks glowing as the fields touched him. Arthur stepped to a conduit node, palms hovering. The light inside him surged toward the machine, eager. Doom's green sigils tightened around Arthur's wrists again, controlling the flow. Ben convulsed as spectrum energy threaded through the pylons and into his body. The glow in his cracks softened, then spiked, too bright. Ben roared, the sound filling the chamber like collapsing stone. Sue's barrier snapped wider, instinctive protection bending the chamber's light. "Stop," Johnny shouted, flames bursting along his arms. Doom did not stop. His eyes stayed on the readouts. He is responding, you see. His drift is reversible. Reed's hands balled into fists. "You're hurting him." "I am saving him," Doom said, voice iron. "And I will do it properly the moment you stop being sentimental about ownership of knowledge." He stepped close enough that only Reed could hear the soft edge under the command. "Give me the equation, Reed," Doom said, "or watch your friend survive in pieces." Ben's roar broke into ragged breaths, the chamber humming higher as the tremors outside returned, the building itself shivering under the strain. Doom held out a tablet, blank and waiting like an altar. "Now," he said. Reed stared at it, then at Ben, and the room's light made every choice look like a weapon. Ben Grimm's roar shook dust loose from the old engine bay rafters. The prismatic pylons answered with a keening note, as if the room had found a pitch it wanted to hold forever. Reed stared at the tablet Doom had offered like it was a confession booth. Sue's fingers brushed his wrist, barely contact but enough. Her eyes said don't, her mouth didn't move. Another tremor rolled through the concrete. Somewhere deeper, a steel beam complained. Doom's voice stayed smooth. "Time is a luxury you have already spent." Ben's cracked shoulder flared white, then dimmed, then flared again. Each spike stole a breath from him. Reed swallowed. His mind did the old arithmetic it always did when people pretended there was one clean answer. What it would cost, who it would hurt, how long it would last. He leaned close to Sue without looking at her. "I can't let him die," he murmured. Sue's jaw tightened. "And you won't let Victor own you." Doom's gloved hand remained extended, patient as a guillotine. Reed took the stylus. His hand moved fast, confident, almost casual, symbols and relationships he'd carried in his head since the storm, braided into something a machine could obey. He wrote the resonance weave as Doom demanded. Then on a line so small it would look like a correction, he changed a sign. A simple inversion, tucked where the math seemed inevitable. A flaw that would not break the treatment today. A flaw that would, under full power, make Spectrum's harmony turn on itself. Reed handed the tablet back. Doom's eyes flickered down, scanning. For the first time in days, a trace of human satisfaction touched his mouth. There. Was that so difficult? Arthur Park stood at the conduit node, wrists haloed with Doom's green sigils. The light under Arthur's skin brightened at the sight of the equation, as if it recognized a door being unlocked. "Arthur," Doom said softly. Arthur inhaled, then let the spectrum flow through him in a controlled stream. The pylons shifted their note. The humming edge softened. Ben's body arched, and then like stone cooling after a furnace, settled. The glow in his cracks dulled from white-hot to ember-red. His breathing steadied into something almost normal. Varga stepped in, hands hovering over Ben's chest without touching. Her eyes checked monitors, then Ben's face. "His vitals are stabilizing." She looked up at Doom as if the success offended her. "For now." Ben blinked, dazed, then managed a rasp. "That's new." Johnny's flames guttered down his arms. Relief and fury tangled in the same breath. "Reed." Reed didn't answer. He kept his face neutral, even as his stomach turned. Doom turned away from the cradle as though the patient was already solved. "Commander Core," he said. Ashakor's posture sharpened. "No." The chamber screens, previously showing medical telemetry, blinked to a global map layered with satellite arcs and port nodes. A cascade of confirmations scrolled. Authority key accepted. ROUTING override. Access granted. Outside the facility, sirens rose again. Not a test tone this time, but a chord. Doom tapped one node. "Protective continuity," he said, as if naming a weather pattern. "Latveria will assume interim stewardship of compromised networks until the international community regains capacity." Core stepped closer to the screen, eyes narrowing. "Those are Stark orbital relays." "Were," Doom corrected. A second window opened. A UN seal beside a list of names, each stamped with a digital warrant. Core's throat tightened. "You issued arrests." Doom's gaze remained on the list. "I requested detentions for those whose independent operations have repeatedly resulted in mass casualty events." Reed recognized some names. Old headlines. New ones. People who had saved the world and broken it and saved it again. Sue's voice came cold. "You're calling it protection so you don't have to say occupation." Doom's dry amusement returned. "Words are for those who require comfort." He gestured, and the border nodes on the map lit up like a necklace snapping shut. I require results. Varga's hands balled into fists at her sides. He's a person, she said, nodding at Ben, not a demonstration for your doctrine. Doom looked at her with something almost respectful, like a general noticing courage. Doctor, keep him alive. That is your doctrine. Ben tried to sit up. The restraint fields held him gently, then firmly. What the hell is going on? Ben demanded. Reed moved, stretching an arm toward the cradle, fingers spreading as if he could peel the field away. Doom didn't bother to look. Mr. Richards. Arthur's head snapped up. The light in him surged, hungry, and for a heartbeat Reed saw a man drowning in brightness. Don't, Sue warned Arthur. Arthur's eyes flicked to Sue's invisible barrier, then to Doom. His voice sounded thin. I can do it clean. Doom's reply was quiet. Do it. Photonic bands erupted from Arthur's hands, hard light weaving into lattices that formed in midair with surgical precision. They wrapped around Reed's extended arm and locked, refracting the fluorescent overhead glare into prismatic knives. Reed felt the light cage tighten, not crushing but immobilizing, like being trapped inside a perfectly measured equation. Johnny flared in an instant, flame on. Fire rolled up his torso, heat distorting the air, until the photonic lattice bent, split the heat into angles and threw it back at him in a blinding glare. Johnny staggered, throwing an arm up to shield his eyes. Sue reacted without thinking. Her force field snapped out, a curved bubble between Johnny and the reflected blast. It held, but the strain made her shoulders tremble. Ben strained against the cradle, stone muscles grinding. Get out of here, he shouted to all of them. We're not leaving you, Sue said through clenched teeth. Doom watched the struggle as if observing an experiment confirm its hypothesis. Family is admirable, he said, but it is not a strategy. Reed met Doom's eyes. The old rivalry lived there, sharpened by 2 decades of Doom's patience and Reed's absence. You promised treatment, Reed said. And you provided the means, Doom replied. You will provide more. Kor lunged toward the console, hand reaching for an emergency cutoff. 2 Latverian guards stepped in, weapons raised. Don't, Kor warned them, voice low. Doom lifted 2 fingers and the guards froze, awaiting his will like puppets. Commander, Doom said, you are here to observe. Continue doing so. Arthur's lattice expanded, blooming into a full containment sphere that enclosed Reed, Sue, and Johnny in separate segments, compartments of light with no seams to grip. Sue pushed at her barrier from inside, testing. The light held. Johnny slammed a flaming fist into the lattice. It rang like struck glass, and he recoiled, pain flashing across his face. Ben's eyes searched theirs, helpless rage mixing with gratitude that he could breathe again. Reed, tell me you didn't. Reed's gaze cut to Ben, then to Sue. He couldn't speak the truth with Doom listening, with Arthur acting as the room's conduit. So he said the only thing that wouldn't give away the flaw. I did what I had to, Reed whispered. Johnny stared at him like the words were a knife. You gave him the equation. Sue's voice softened, but her eyes didn't. Reed. Doom turned toward the exit, cloak trailing like the shadow of a flag. Secure them, he told Arthur, and then to Varga. Keep Mr. Grimm stable. If he deteriorates, you will inform me before you inform your conscience. Arthur's breathing became shallow as the lattice drank the chamber's ambient light. He looked at Reed, a flicker of apology trapped behind his pupils. I'm sorry, Arthur said, as if saying it could make it true. The tremor returned stronger. The facility groaned. Above, the world's ports and satellites changed hands with silent, obedient clicks. Inside the light cages, the Fantastic Four stood separated for the first time since they'd woken. And in Reed's mind, the hidden sign in his equation waited, patient as Doom's hand had been, promising that this victory would not stay clean for long. The light around Sue had no seams. It was beautiful in the way a scalpel was beautiful, precise, sterile, indifferent. She pressed her palm to it anyway. Her force field met Arthur Parks's photonic lattice with a pressure that made her teeth ache. The lattice didn't yield. It sang, softly, like glass rubbed the wrong way. Across the segmented sphere, Johnny paced like a caged animal, flame flickering under his skin, but never quite igniting. Reed stood still, shoulders slightly hunched, eyes fixed on the floor as if the concrete held an equation he'd misplaced. Beyond them, Ben lay in the cradle, half upright now, restraints humming. His rocky chest rose and fell slower than it had minutes ago, alive, stabilized, still trapped. Another tremor rolled through the facility. A thin stream of dust sifted from the rafters and caught in the lattice, turning the air into a glittering snowfall. Ben's voice scraped out, "Sue, you okay?" Sue swallowed hard. "I'm here." Johnny slammed a fist into the lattice. The sound rang. His knuckles didn't bruise, his pride did. "This is insane. We're in a snow globe." "Lower your temperature," Reed said without looking up. Johnny laughed once sharp. "Oh, now we're doing breathing exercises." Sue forced herself to turn toward Reed. "Reed." He lifted his gaze at last. In his eyes she saw the 90s hangar lights, the countdown, the moment he'd chosen the storm anyway. "I heard Ben scream," he said quietly, "and I did the thing I always do. I calculated." Ben's rocky fingers flexed against the restraint. "Don't start that stretch." "It's the truth," Reed said. His voice thinned. "I keep pretending knowledge is a shield. It is. It's a blade. And I keep handing it to people who promise they'll only cut what's necessary." Sue's throat tightened. "We survive by staying together, not by getting it perfect." Reed flinched as if she'd touched a bruise. On the far side of the chamber, Commander Kor sat on a metal chair, wrists zip-tied. Two Latverian guards watched her with bored focus. The half-removed SWORD patch on her jacket looked like a wound. Kor met Sue's eyes. In the pause between tremors, she lifted her bound hands slightly and let the zip tie slide, just a centimeter, revealing a thin strip of metallic thread woven into her sleeve. Sue understood, not freedom but a tool. Varga stepped in from the medical station, face set, braid tight. She checked Ben's monitors with a fury that made her movements crisp. "Grimm's cellular readouts are leveling," she said to no one, then glanced at Doom's empty doorway as if daring him to appear. "For now." Reed's head turned. "Doctor, if you can get to the pylons, base plates, the grounding straps." Varga cut him off. "I can do more than that." She leaned close to Ben, voice low. "If I tell you to hold still, you will hold still." Ben huffed a laugh that sounded like stone grinding. "Doc, I'm a sculpture. I do still." The tremor returned stronger. The cradle's restraints flickered. For a heartbeat, the photonic lattice brightened as Arthur unconsciously compensated. A shiver ran through the light like a living thing trying to breathe. Sue felt it. The lattice wasn't just a prison. It was fed. Johnny felt it too. His bravado slipped, eyes widening. "That's not normal." "No," Sue said and steadied her voice. "It's a person's pain wearing a cage." Kor used the tremor as cover. She snapped the zip tie by twisting it against the chair's edge, then palmed the metallic thread, an ultra-thin SWORD resonator wire, between her fingers. She didn't stand. She didn't run. She waited until the guard's attention drifted back to the door. Varga moved as if adjusting a drip line, but her foot nudged a cart, metal clanking just loud enough to pull one guard's eyes. Kor sprang. In one motion, she looped the resonator wire around the nearest guard's rifle barrel and yanked. The weapon clattered to the floor. She drove an elbow into his throat, caught the second guard's wrist, and used his momentum to slam him into the console. Alarms chirped, brief, confused. Sue didn't wait for permission. She shaped her force field into a thin curve, a lens, and pressed it against the lattice where the dust glittered. "Johnny," she said, voice tight. "Now, short burst." Johnny hesitated. Fear flashed across his face, raw, boyish, nothing like the grin he wore for cameras. Sue held his gaze through the light. "You can be scared and still move." Johnny swallowed, nodding once. "Okay, okay." He inhaled, and for the first time his flames didn't explode. They focused. A concentrated flare struck Sue's curved field. The heat refracted. The lattice screamed, pitch climbing, and a hairline fracture raced across it, light breaking like ice. Reed stretched his fingers into the crack, impossibly thin, and pulled. The fracture widened. Air rushed in, cold and real. Kor shouted, "Move," and tossed a fallen access badge through the opening. Sue yanked Johnny through first, then Reed. Their feet hit the concrete. The chamber felt too big without the cage around them. Ben strained against the cradle, eyes blazing. "Don't you dare leave me." Sue ran to him, hands hovering helpless. The restraints hummed stronger now, reacting to escape. Varga grabbed Sue's wrist. "If you touch the field, you'll trigger a shock response." Reed's face tightened. He looked at Ben, then at the corridor beyond, where Doom's footsteps would soon return, silent, assured. "We can't get him out in time," Kor said, scanning the corridor. "Not with the border lockdown." Johnny's flame sputtered. "So what we just—" "Johnny," Ben's voice cut through, steady despite everything. Listen to me. You get her out, you get help. You come back when you can actually win. Johnny's jaw worked. Ben. Ben's rocky mouth lifted in something that was almost gentle. Family ain't always holding hands. Sometimes it's doing the ugly part so the others can breathe. Sue's eyes stung. I'm not leaving you. Ben met her gaze. Yes, you are, because I'm asking you, and because I trust you. The word landed hard in the chamber. Reed stepped closer to the cradle, voice low so only Ben could hear. I'm not running. Ben blinked, understanding in the smallest shift of his brow. You got a plan. I have a chance, Reed said. If Doom thinks he has me, I can get close to Spectrum. He glanced toward the floor where the pylon's cables disappeared. And if I can steal a piece of it, maybe I can make something that helps you without him. Ben's eyes narrowed. Don't get yourself killed, Stretch. Reed's mouth twitched, pained. I'm trying something new. Sue grabbed Reed's sleeve. Reed. He covered her hand with his just for a second. Go, please. Let me do this part. Core was already moving, guiding Sue and Johnny toward a maintenance hatch. Varga silently indicated with a nod. A service tunnel breathed stale air up at them. As Sue climbed down, she looked back. Reed stayed by Ben's cradle, shoulders squared, waiting. The corridor darkened, then brightened as a green sigil flared on the floor. Victor Von Doom entered like a verdict. His gaze swept the chamber, unconscious guards, the fractured lattice, the empty spaces where Sue and Johnny had been. He didn't raise his voice. Parks, Doom said softly. Arthur stood in the doorway behind him, light pulsing beneath his skin in frantic, guilty waves. He stared at the broken lattice like it was his own ribs. Doom's attention returned to Reed. You remained. Reed lifted his chin. Ben's vitals will crash again if you keep pushing power through that crystal. Doom's eyes narrowed, almost curious. And you intend to help me prevent that? I intend to prevent Arthur from burning out, Reed said, glancing toward Arthur. And I intend to keep Ben alive. Arthur's breath hitched at his name, like a man hearing a lifeline. Doom stepped closer, voice lowering into something intimate and cold. Do not mistake your guilt for virtue, Richards. Guilt is a leash, and you are still on mine. Reed's gaze didn't waver. Then take me to the prism. Let me fix the stabilization so it doesn't tear your conduit apart. For a moment, Doom's face, handsome, tired around the eyes, looked almost human beneath the arrogance. Every catastrophe this world has survived, Doom murmured. It survived by accident. I will not leave Earth to accidents. He turned, cloak sweeping. Come, if you betray me, you will learn what order costs. Reed followed, heartbeat loud in his ears. Behind them, Ben lay trapped but breathing. Ahead, deep under Latverian concrete, Project Spectrum hummed like a star trapped in glass, waiting for Reed to get close enough to steal a sliver of salvation. The elevator had no buttons. It was a steel throat that swallowed Reed whole, guided by Doom's will and a key he never saw. Green runes drifted along the seams like reflections on water. Reed stood with his hands loose at his sides, forcing his breathing to match the slow, deliberate descent. Doom faced the doors, cloak still, as if gravity negotiated with him. Behind Reed, Arthur Parks leaned against the wall, light pulsing under his skin in uneven waves. He looked sick and bright at once. Try not to fidget, Doom said. It implies conscience. I have one, Reed replied. Doom's mouth tilted. That Richards is the problem. The lift opened into cold. Project Spectrum's chamber was cathedral-wide, carved out of bedrock and lined with conduits that disappeared into the dark like roots. In the center, the crystal rose from a dais of layered alloys, faceted and wrong, light trapped in angles that made Reed's eyes water. It hummed at a pitch that didn't touch ears so much as teeth. A man stepped from behind a console of prismatic screens, a lean figure in a lab coat that looked too clean for this place. His hair was silvered at the temples. His eyes were sharp and impatient. Ambassador, he said, voice carrying a crackle as if his throat held a hidden filament. You brought him. Doom didn't introduce him, but Reed didn't need the courtesy. The living laser, Reed said. The man's smile was thin. Doctor, if you insist. And you're late, Reed Richards. Time has always been your favorite variable to squander. Arthur flinched at Reed's name, as if it yanked him backward into the 90s, into hangars and coffee and optimism. Doom moved to the edge of the dais. Richards will stabilize the prism. You will assist. Dr. Parks will serve as conduit, and no one will indulge in improvisation. Living Laser's eyes slid to Arthur with clinical hunger. He's a flawed battery. Arthur's hands curled. I'm standing right here. You're flickering, Laser replied. Batteries don't get offended. Reed stepped forward before Arthur could ignite in a way that wasn't metaphor. Show me the last harmonic drift. A screen tilted toward him, responding to Doom's gesture, not Reed's. Lines of data scrolled, resonance peaks, phase offsets, the same song Doom had forced through Ben's body. Reed's mind locked onto one tremble in the pattern. Not an error. A seam. It ran through spectrum like a hairline fracture, a place where the energy braided and unbraided, where a sliver could be coaxed free if touched at the correct angle. A cure didn't need the whole star. It needed a spark. Doom watched him with a patience that felt practiced. Proceed. Reed approached the dais. Heatless light licked his skin. He could feel his cells answering it, his altered body humming along like an instrument that had been waiting to be played. He stretched his fingers slowly, subtly, enough to reach the interface ports without appearing to reach beyond what he should. He laid his palm on a cold metal ring and let his other hand hover near the crystal. Your stabilization algorithm is too rigid, Reed said, eyes on the readouts. You're forcing a single-phase lock. It wants to breathe. Breathing is disorder, Doom said. It's survival, Reed replied and began to work. He fed the system a braided resonance, not the coerced weave Doom loved, but a version that flexed. The hum shifted. The air thickened, and for a moment Reed saw the cosmic storm again, black velvet stitched with violent color. Arthur gasped. The light under his skin surged, not outward but inward, as if Spectrum took a sip and then decided Arthur was worth keeping. Hold, Reed murmured to him without turning. Don't fight it, let it pass through. Arthur's voice shook. It hurts. I know, Reed's throat tightened. He remembered Ben's scream, he remembered Sue's eyes. Just stay with me. The tremors that had plagued the facility reached down here too. A low groan rolled through stone. Dust drifted from a beam and glittered in Spectrum's glow. Living Laser snapped. The bedrock's shifting, we should pause. Doom didn't look away from Reed. The earth trembles, it always has. Continue. Reed adjusted the phase offset by a fraction. The seam in the crystal brightened. There, his elongated fingertip, thin to a filament, slid into a gap between facets that no ordinary hand could reach. He felt resistance, like glass remembering how to be one piece. He did not yank. He persuaded. A gentle twist, timed to the chamber's tremor. The shard gave with a sound, like a held breath being released. A sliver the size of a thumbnail detached, spinning once in the air, incandescent. Reed pinched it between two stretched fingers and in the same motion, snapped his hand back to the console as if correcting a line of code. The shard vanished into his palm. His skin folded over it, hiding it in a pocket of flesh he shaped like a seam in a glove. Pain flared, sharp and electric. The shard was alive. Living Laser's head jerked up, his pupils contracted, reflecting Spectrum's color. We lost mass. Doom's voice was soft. Explain. Laser stepped closer to the dais, hands lifting as if he could smell the theft. The output is stable, yes, but the crystal's signature shifted. Something was removed. Arthur stared at Reed, eyes wide, a silent question and a silent fear. Doom's gaze settled on Reed's hands. Reed forced his shoulders to stay level. Stability has a cost. You wanted it to stop tearing your conduit apart. He nodded toward Arthur. Now it won't. Doom walked to him, each step measured. A circle of green light unfolded beneath Reed's feet, locking his ankles to the stone with a weight that wasn't physical. Reed's body tried to stretch out of it. The spell tightened like a noose. You have always been clever, Doom said, close enough now that Reed could smell cold metal and faint incense. But cleverness is not invisibility. I fixed it, Reed said. Doom's eyes narrowed, and you stole from it. Reed met his stare. I took what I need to keep my family alive. At the word family, Arthur made a sound, half laugh, half choke. Living Laser's hands crackled with contained radiance. Let me open him. I'll find it. No, Doom said, not taking his eyes off Reed. Richards is not a specimen, he is a lesson. The sigils rose, climbing Reed's legs like cold vines. Reed felt the shard burning through his makeshift pocket, searching for a way to bond, to sing its way into his blood. He clenched his jaw until his teeth hurt. You think you're saving Grimm, Doom said, but you are teaching me how to remove the concept of mercy from you. Reed's voice came out hoarse. You already removed it from yourself. Doom's slap was quiet and absolute. Reed's head snapped sideways. Bright stars burst behind his eyes. Arthur lurched forward, then stopped, as if an invisible collar yanked him back. Victor. Doom turned his head a fraction. Arthur. That single syllable carried years. Funding, promises, guilt, ownership. Arthur's face tightened. The light under his skin surged, then dimmed to obedience. Yes. Search him, Doom ordered, carefully. Arthur's hands hovered near Reed's chest, trembling. His eyes flicked up, pleading without words. Reed's lips barely moved. Don't. Arthur swallowed. If I don't heal. Another tremor rolled through the chamber, stronger. The conduits rattled. Somewhere above, metal screamed. The shard in Reed's palm flared in response. And for one dangerous heartbeat, the hidden pocket of skin went transparent with light. Living Laser saw it. There. Doom's hand shot out, faster than Reed expected, and closed around Reed's wrist. Green energy crawled over Reed's forearm, trying to pry flesh open like a lock. Reed reacted on instinct. His arm elongated, twisting bonelessly, slipping in a way that should have dislocated him but didn't. He let the shard slide deeper, tucking it along the inside of his forearm, beneath a layer of muscle he shaped into a sheath. The spell tightened, pain lanced up to his shoulder. Doom felt the movement, his grip became iron. You will not outstretch me. Reed bared his teeth. Maybe not, but you don't have to. He looked past Doom to the crystal. Stable now. Perfectly stable. The seam he had exploited was still there, a weakness Doom wouldn't know how to see until it was too late. Doom followed Reed's gaze and, for the first time, his composure fractured into something sharp with fury. You think in terms of pieces, Doom said. So I will take your world apart piece by piece until you understand what it costs to steal from me. Reed's breath hitched as Doom's magic tightened again, forcing him to his knees. Somewhere in the stone corridors above, Sue and Johnny were running for air. Here, under tons of Latverian rock, Reed held a shard of a star inside his own arm and tried not to scream. Survival, he realized, was not the opposite of surrender. Sometimes it was the thing you did so you could fight tomorrow. The green sigils around Reed's ankles tightened, until the stone beneath his feet creaked. Doom kept Reed on his knees as if gravity had sworn fealty. You will yield the shard, he said, voice low, almost conversational. Or you will watch your friends become the proof that sentiment is a fatal defect. Living Laser's fingers hovered near the prism's consoles, light cracking under his skin like static. The missing mass is pulling the phase off axis. We're bleeding coherence. Arthur stood beside Reed, hands trembling, eyes fixed on Reed's forearm where the shard hid like a fever. Victor, if it spikes. It will not spike, Doom said. Then, softer to Arthur alone, do what you were built to do. The conduits in the bedrock answered with a hungry thrum. Somewhere above, the facility groaned in a new tremor. Dust fell in glittering sheets. On the far side of the chamber, an access hatch buckled inward. Sue Storm came through first, a pale, shimmering plane of force preceding her like the prow of a ship. Johnny followed in a rush of heat and smoke, his face set hard in a way Reed had never seen in the 90s. Commander Core slid in after them, weapon up, SWORD patch half torn from her jacket. Latverian perimeter just went blind, she snapped. Whatever you're doing, you're shaking half the mountain. Doom didn't turn. Mrs. Richards, still arriving where you are not invited. Sue's voice didn't wobble. Let him go. Living Laser fired first, a razor line of concentrated radiance at Sue's throat. Sue's invisible field caught it with a sound like glass singing. The beam bent, skated, and carved a molten line into the stone beside Doom's boot. Johnny ignited in full, flame roaring up his shoulders. That's my cue. He lunged at Living Laser, but the man moved like a thought, his body thinning into a lance of light that slipped between Johnny's flames and reformed behind him, slamming a photonic band around Johnny's waist. Johnny grunted, twisting, heat flaring. Reed, Sue. Ben's roar rolled in from the corridor, raw and furious. The restraints Varga had argued about were now snapped like thread. Ben Grimm barreled into the chamber with one shoulder, half-cradle attached to his back by dangling cables. Dr. Varga appeared behind him, breathless, lab coat smeared with dust. I said, Ben thundered, eyes bright with pain and purpose, nobody hurts my family. The word family struck through Reed like a chord. Doom finally faced them, taking in the scene as if he were assessing a board position, not a battlefield. How predictable, he said. All four pieces reunite, thinking proximity equals strength. Sue stepped closer, her force field tightening around Reed's legs. She didn't try to break Doom's magic. She shaped a wedge, a careful pressure point. Reed felt the spell resist, then slip just enough. Core raised her weapon toward the prism's conduits. Stand down, Doom. SWRD will. Will do nothing, Doom cut in. His hand lifted, fingers drawing a small circle in the air. The world cracked. Not with noise, with perspective. The chamber inverted into a cathedral of reflections, the walls becoming endless faceted mirrors that repeated Sue's determined face and Johnny's fire and Ben's hulking silhouette into infinity. Reed saw himself 1,000 times over, each version kneeling, each version refusing. Mirror dimension. Doom's cloak didn't flutter here. It hung as if nailed to reality. In this place, Doom said, collateral cannot escape. Consider it mercy. Mercy doesn't come with chains, Sue replied. Living Laser smiled, teeth bright in the mirrored light. Now we can be honest. He exploded into a spray of beams that ricocheted off the mirrored planes, multiplying into a lattice of kill lines. Sue reacted without thinking. Her force fields folded and curved, creating invisible prisms that caught the beams and redirected them into harmless spirals. Each deflection trembled through her arms like recoil. Johnny tore free of his band by going hotter than Reed had ever seen, not just flame but white-edged heat. He darted through Sue's safe corridors, tagging mirrors with bursts that spiderwebbed them. Ben didn't dodge. He advanced, taking a beam to the shoulder that scorched mineral and left a glowing groove. He didn't slow. I'm already ugly, Ben growled and brought his fist down. The mirror floor shattered into floating plates. Gravity stuttered. Reed stretched, snapping his arm across 3 drifting panels to catch a falling core by her jacket. Hold on. I'm holding, she barked, then tossed him a small resonator puck. You like frequencies, Richards. Make yourself useful. Reed's mind ran the geometry of reflections and phase angles even as Doom's magic tried to reroute him to kneeling. He saw it then. The prism's hum threaded through every mirror. Doom wasn't just containing the fight. He was feeding spectrum with it. Arthur floated near the main conduit, tethered by green sigils that dug into his wrists like cuffs. Light pulsed beneath his skin in sick rhythms. Doom glanced at him. Arthur now. Arthur's eyes met Reed's for a fraction of a second, old memories, old hope, and the current terror. If I draw more, Arthur whispered, it'll burn him. It'll burn all of you. Doom's tone cooled. Then you will endure. That is what heroes do, is it not? Arthur's mouth twitched, a bitter almost smile. You don't get to use that word. He clenched his fists. Instead of pushing power into the prism, Arthur turned his light inward, forcing it through Doom's sigils like a current through brittle wire. The bindings around Reed's legs snapped with a crack of green. Doom's head turned sharply. Arthur. Arthur's voice shook, but it held. I'm done being your battery. Living Laser lunged for Arthur, enraged, but Ben intercepted, one rocky hand closing around Laser's wrist. Sorry, Glowstick, Ben said, and threw him through 3 mirrored planes. Living Laser hit reflections that fractured and reformed him in stuttering flashes, his body briefly splitting into impossible angles. Doom lifted both hands, pulling the mirror dimension tighter, compressing it like a clenched fist. Enough. Reed felt the shard burning inside his forearm, desperate to resonate. Knowledge, Reed thought, not Doom's, ours. He stretched his fingers, opened the hidden pocket of flesh, and slid the shard out. It lit his palm like a piece of trapped dawn. Sue saw it and didn't ask. She only angled her force field to shield Reed's hand from Doom's line of sight. Reed pressed the shard against Core's resonator puck. The harmonics snapped into alignment. The mirror dimension sang. The prism on the dais flared in response, greedy and unstable. The missing mass, Reed's earlier sabotage, Arthur's rebellion, everything converged into one impossible note. Living Laser screamed, it's overloading. Doom's eyes widened, not with fear, with calculation. He thrust a hand forward, carving a door in the mirror air, a sharp-edged exit made of pure fracture. Laser, with me. Sue threw a force field spear toward the opening, trying to pin it shut, but Doom's sorcery sheared it apart like silk. Johnny dove after them, flames trailing, but Ben caught him midair by the ankle. No, Ben barked. We don't die chasing him. The prism erupted. Not an explosion, an erasure. Light atomized into a silent bloom that consumed the mirrored cathedral from the inside, turning reflections into blank whiteness. Reed wrapped his arms around Sue and Johnny by instinct, stretching himself into a sheltering knot. Sue's force field locked around them, a clear shell within the oncoming void. Ben braced like a wall, one arm around Varga, the other grabbing Arthur's sleeve. Cor hit the floor and covered her head, teeth clenched against the impossible brightness. For a heartbeat, there was nothing but white. Then the world dropped back into stone and cold air. The dais was gone. The prismatic conduits were slag. Where Spectrum had stood, there was only drifting ash that sparkled, settling like gray snow. A final shard of mirror hung in midair for an instant, Doom's exit collapsing on itself. Reed caught one last glimpse through it, Doom's maskless face, calm and furious, and living Laser's body dissolving into light as they fled. Doom's voice carried back like a promise through cracked glass. You have won a room, not the world. The shard winked out. Silence rushed in, broken only by the faraway wail of facility alarms dying one by one. Sue touched Reed's face, gentle, checking for blood he hadn't noticed. Are you here? She whispered. Reed nodded, throat tight. He looked at Ben. Ben was still standing. Cracks traced his rocky skin, but the glow had calmed to a faint ember, no longer trying to tear him apart. Ben's eyes were wet and stubborn. So, he said, voice rough, we gonna talk about how you had a piece of a star in your arm. Reed opened his hand. The shard was still there, smaller now, dulled at the edges but alive. Not his star, Reed said, and his voice steadied with the weight of it. Ours. Cor stared at the ruined chamber, then at the four of them. Her comm unit crackled back to life with distant voices, urgent and frightened. She muted it. You just punched a hole in a global takeover, she said. He's going to respond. Varga wiped ash from her cheek. And you are going to survive long enough to decide what kind of symbols you become. Johnny's flames guttered down to heat shimmer. He stepped closer, shoulder brushing Sue's, a quiet apology for every time he'd treated danger like a joke. Sue tightened her arm around him. Ben placed his rocky hand over Reed, careful not to crush the shard. Family, Ben said, as if naming a law. Reed looked at the ash, at the broken conduits, at the space where Doom's certainty had been. Trust, he thought, wasn't a feeling. It was a choice made in the middle of collapse. Above them, through a rent in the facility ceiling, the night sky showed a single indifferent star. Reed closed his fingers around the shard, and, for the first time since waking in Latveria, allowed himself to believe they could make it home.